To Mortgages Made Easy. I'm your host, Phil Moses, and today I'm joined by three of the best mortgage advisors in the industry. We've got Pete, Ed, and Gary, and we're going to be talking through all things mortgages and protection. So Gary, we'll start with you. How did you get into mortgages?
Well, it's a long journey. How far back do we need to go? I think coming over here 2007 from South Africa, fresh, green off the boat, and I suppose sales is kind of naturally what I fell into, and into real estate. And I think that's where my love for property kind of began to grow. Moving on, well, I think starting off at Foxton's, one of the bigger agencies in the capital. And it was a hard graft. There was a lot of competition, and it really taught you to kind of knuckle down and get a good work ethic behind everything. And moving on from that, as my career progressed, moving on to different roles, valuing property, instructing property, and then deal chasing things through to completion. I'd kind of reached a point where I was like, what do I want to do for the rest of my life?
Yeah.
As I think a lot of people eventually get to question that about themselves. And the finance aspect of a purchase seemed like a natural transition with the property background that I had and all of that knowledge to be able to then help people facilitate that part of their journey. So made the jump after doing my studies right in COVID. So what an incredible time to join. And it really taught me how to actually knuckle down. It was going from employed to self-employed was also a big jump and a big decision. But looking back on it, I had absolutely no regrets, if not that I hadn't done it sooner. And so that's kind of where I am to now. Yeah.
Enjoying it so far?
So far, so good. I think it has its ups and its downs, and I think the property market, the longer that you work in it, the more that you realize that it does go through cycles. And ultimately, as I said, if you keep working harder than the people next to you, you'll be fine.
Perfect. Yeah. Couldn't have said it better myself, Gary. Ed, what about yourself?
Mortgages now for nearly 5 years, Prestige for approaching 4 years. Prior to that, being in financial services longer than I dare to think. Started in sort of the insurance space back in about 2000, 2002. So it's been a long time. Got made redundant from that industry back end of 2020. Opportunity came about to move into a mortgage role.
Yeah.
Did that elsewhere for a period of time, and then through a mutual connection, a broker at Prestige, got introduced to the company, saw that as the ideal next step for me in the mortgage world, took it, not looked back since.
Yeah.
You know, I think dealing with customers on a day-to-day basis, understanding what their needs are, you know, looking to help them achieve their aspirations, massive thing. You know, it's really enjoyable when you get a client, have a positive outcome. You can help them with their purchase, refinance, any kind of journey that they're on. And yeah, it's something that I really enjoy.
Perfect. Great. Pete, you've got a bit slightly sort of newer to the industry, aren't you?
Yeah,
You've been in it
definitely.
for,
I'm the
year and a half, so just over.
Yeah, I'm
just
the
under?
whippersnapper of the group.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely. Trying to think now. So I initially started working in financial services before I moved down to London. And then COVID hit and training and pandemics and whatnot. And then I moved down to London after. So we started in a estate agency, working in lettings initially, and thoroughly enjoyed that. And then moved into the sales side. So, you know, understand the kind of buying process, but that kind of itch of financial services was still very much there. And it felt like the perfect fit because I've always had a strong interest in property. And then I could combine the two essentially, with both doing the protection and the mortgages. I've always been that guy on Rightmove who loves looking at properties they can't afford. So thoroughly enjoyed, working in property still, but obviously in the mortgage side now, and not having, not the estate agency. But it was a fantastic, starting point essentially for me to kind of learn the process throughout, like Gary mentioned, sales progressing all the way through. And I think that's been really beneficial, now moving into this kind of role.
I just want to come back to something that you mentioned, Gary. Obviously, you started off in estate agency when you first came over from South Africa, and you talked about working at a massive agency, and that gave you a massive foundation. Do you think taking the foundations that you learned there and taking it into this role now that you do has helped you?
100%. I think that if you think everything's going to come to you, you're deluded, because you have to put in the hard graft and have that constant touching with regards to your applicants or the clients that you're talking to, because that's ultimately how you're going to build relationships. And I think having that work ethic in that sales environment that was quite competitive really did help with regards to knowing how to structure your day and making sure that you make time rather than just dealing with what's coming towards you, and having a structure and making sure that you do every part of your business so that you have that conveyor belt constantly generating business for yourself.
Do you think that gets overlooked quite a lot in our industry?
A lot of the time. I think whenever I speak to people about, when asking them what are you looking for in a broker, I think that it's a question that kind of throws them sometimes because people don't honestly think about it. All the things like getting the best rate, I think any decent broker has access to every rate out there. But where I think a good broker kind of shifts away from somebody else is where I suppose you are able to put your personality, your touch onto it, and ultimately give that level of service that people are going to want to pass on your name to anybody else, and that you could help out. And then also that they're going to come back to you as and when that deal expires. So yes, having that personal relationship, and most importantly, getting back to people in a timely manner, I think has really helped.
It's about trust.
Generate that pipeline.
There has to be that level of trust from a client to the broker that they're dealing with, and I think that's probably the biggest thing. Because it's something that we say all the time when we're talking to people, when we're talking to a first-time buyer or a negotiator, an estate agency. But buying a property is probably the biggest financial transaction that someone's going to make. But once you do it, once you buy something, the journey's not over. It's not finished. It's not like you buy it and then you never speak to us again or you never follow up. The idea is that you want to retain that client for life. And the only way you're going to do that is by building the trust with them right at the very start.
Definitely. I think on top of that, some brokers will get you the mortgage offer. You won't hear from them again until completion, and if not even after that. I think that bringing it back to our estate agency background, that I think the majority of prestige brokers have, is understanding that deal process and being able to touch base with people at points through the conveyancing process, because ultimately, if there's something that's stopping things progressing with the lawyers, having that extensive knowledge with regards to how to possibly problem solve can kind of give the client a nudge to maybe speak to the agent about talking to the other solicitor, because the agent's the only one that can speak to both sides really. So being able to then give them tidbits of possible problem solving just helps to get the deal through to exchange quicker. As we all know, time is the killer of all deals.
Massively.
Let's get to exchange as quickly as possible so that anything might not necessarily pop up and derail everything.
Perfect. And Ed, you spoke, obviously you've I didn't realize you'd been in sort of protection advising since the early 2000s. Well, that sort of financial sort of services area. Have you still got clients or friends that you first dealt with way back then that you're still dealing with now, almost 15, 20 years later?
Yeah, so the insurance work I was doing back then wasn't solely focused around protection as such, but what I built up through that nearly 20 year period, well, in the absence of having like the agency background like Gary's got and some of the other guys, it is that sort of stakeholder management, that is what I put down as one of my strong points. So taking a process, Gary talked about, post offer, leading that application, leading that purchase through to completion. That is something that for me is a huge part of our role. You don't just let go of a case once you've got the offer. You follow it through, you speak with the client, you help them. And I think my background, whilst not being directly around the protection, it is all about kind of managing the process through to the end, not just letting go of it once you've got the offer. And I think through what I had to do sort of previously in the stakeholder management, managing sort of departments of 40, 50 people, that's helped me kind of have really good holistic oversight of each case that I have, so I can see that right through to the end. You know, through that period, I have met a lot of people, stayed in contact with a lot of people, and naturally, you know, when I moved across to Prestige and particularly going to being self-employed, you know, Gary's already talked about the step that is, you know, it's a bit of a leap of faith moment. I've leaned on those people, and, you know, through that I've managed to put through and help a lot of those guys as well with regards to their own mortgage needs. So kind of extending to my personal network in the early days was a massive help.
Yeah, and that's obviously then what you'd like to think, and you'd hope that from those personal connections that you've made, they've then referred them on to other people. And all that kind of stuff.
It's a nice pat on the back when, you know, you get a random text or a phone call and so is giving me your number, you know, they said that you did a nice job for them and, you know, that I need to talk to you. And that's always good. And ultimately that's how individually as brokers, you know, we all want our personal kind of client banks to develop. It is through that organic growth, you know. Sort of introductions through professional networks is great, and it is sort of the staple part of our businesses, but having that organic growth within is, you know, is a sign that we're doing the right thing.
Yeah, massively. And Pete, obviously we mentioned it before, obviously you're coming at it from a very, very different angle from obviously Gary and Ed, because they've obviously been in the industry for a lot longer than you have. So you've got a completely different perspective on things, and you're still trying to build up that client book, or so to speak. What's something that you've learned sort of so early in your career, but sort of early into this role that you didn't sort of realize coming into it initially?
I think, like you say, obviously I'm very new into it. So a lot of my client base at the moment, I deal with predominantly first-time buyers. So I think I've learned a fair bit from helping them, like going back to what Gary said, obviously it doesn't stop there with the offer. You know, we can sometimes turn an offer around in, we've had them as quick as 4 hours like you did yesterday. But it doesn't stop there, because with first time buyers, you know, they may obviously organise a survey, particularly in you know, on a property, a period property in London, that survey, you know, could come back with a bit of damp on it. And surveyors will cover themselves to no end these days to make sure that that's, you know, that they're safe. But then you get the, you know, the phone call from that first time buyer and that client going, oh God, what, you know, I'm gonna have to pull out and all of this, and they start to panic. And it's, you know, from my estate agency days, I've learned just to be like, well, actually just send it across to me. Let me have a look at it. Because sometimes they make it out 10 times worse than it actually is. And if you're buying a period property in London, it's likely going to have a few issues that snagged on there, which are going to have to be, like, you're going to have to deal with. And it's just applying that kind of experience that I've had from estate agency to calm clients down and basically make sure that otherwise they'll be pulling out properties.
You almost find yourself playing agony aunt a lot.
Yeah, exactly. And like I said, obviously, you know, after the offer is in, it definitely doesn't stop there, because there's so much further to go. But I think that's why, you know, we also, you know, our experience at Prestige, all in that estate agency background, has helped us tenfold, because obviously, there are kind of brokers out there who have only ever done the finance side and never been in a estate agency, and they are just another number. Whereas, like, you know, most of my clients catch me on WhatsApp or send me properties before they've even gone out to view, going, from your estate agency back, what do you think of this? And I enjoy that. You know, I enjoy that kind of right from that search with them from the beginning all the way through. And that's that's definitely something I've learned from the estate agency side.
I think to pick up from Pete on there as to the move from estate agency to financial services, it's great because when you're an estate agent, you only get to sell the properties that you have. But when you're dealing with somebody with regards to their purchase, you get to build that relationship. Because I found as an estate agent, you build a great relationship with somebody, and then they'd buy something from the guy down the road. Whereas as a broker, you are just relying on yourself in building that relationship with that person. And then, as Pete alluded to, helping them be able to view properties, give them things to ask the agent, things about leasehold, has there been any structural issues, all that kind of stuff that you could kind of then deal with, but more importantly, no matter where they buy, you're the person that's then able to help them.
Yeah. Amazing.
And I think that for us at Prestige, I think that's probably one of our sort of real unique points is from the first moment we talk to a client, you know, we are fully engaged with them through the whole process. You said kind of agony aunt sort of, you know, that is essentially it. We can act as that person. And from day one, you know, we can, particularly for first time buyers, you know, if they have yet to even scratch the surface of what their search, what the kind of financial landscape looks like for them, we hold their hand through the whole journey, you know, however long that takes. You know, sometimes you have that first initial conversation with somebody, it might be a year, could be longer, could be 2 weeks before they actually get out active searching and sort of looking to get offers, and you are guiding them through the whole journey. You know, as Pete says, you can get texts on WhatsApp at 2 o'clock on a Saturday afternoon, I've just been to see this property, you know, what do you think? And if there's any standout sort of detail in the particulars that we feel it's relevant to flag, you know, with the client, we'll flag it, because they need to potentially loop back into the agent and ask a question, you know, if it's details around the lease or anything, you know, like that. All things we then need to sort of have clarity on from the mortgage side of things, whether it's sort of helping them understand values on properties, you know, talking through where they might want to pitch an offer. All of that, you know, it is potentially surprising to people how involved we get in the process, rather than just simply, this is a good deal for you, whatever, and sort of off you go with it. You know, you are with them all the way through. You know, once they've moved into the property, you're telling them, you know, this is when we're going to be back in contact with you. You know, we follow through on that contact. So for them, you know, clients will feel comfortable knowing that we are looking after their needs throughout their whole ownership timeframe. You know, and as and when they need anything ad hoc in that period, they know just to drop us a message, and then we'll pick up and go from there.
Well, that leads on quite nicely to my sort of next topic, which was to talk about sort of, we've spoken a lot about mortgages and stuff, but protection is something I don't think a lot of clients have as much exposure to, in terms, I mean, you hear news every day about the base rates and interest rates going up and down, but there's not as much talk in, you know, news articles and stuff like that about the protection world and stuff like that. And obviously, Pete and Ed, you being mortgage and protection advisors, talk to us through sort of why protection matters for our clients. We'll start with you, Pete. I mean, if you're not just a first-time buyer, but sometimes, you know, you get people that have lived in properties for a number of years and they've never been protected. And it's that phone call you never want to get as an advisor to say something bad's happened.
Absolutely.
You know, that's worst case scenario. But I mean, sort of over to you. I mean, why does protection matter?
It's crucial. You know, then unfortunately, it's with protection, I think it's one of those things where people are so focused on the mortgage itself. It's, you know, we're all guilty of it. You know, let's just get the mortgage done and then we'll sort that later. That's usually how it goes, and that's some of the challenges we have speaking to clients when we initially bring it up to them. But it's so important. I mean, ultimately, like you say, a property is probably the biggest investment you're going to make. You know, why wouldn't you protect that? You know, it's all great working so hard to afford a property to buy. But then what happens if you know, have a serious illness, or you then are maybe self-employed, your job is very, you know, labor, you know, manual labor or something like that. You have an injury, you can't afford payments, you know, it's vital. And even little things, I know it sounds silly, but like, you know, I bought a new phone 12 months ago, still haven't got it insured. I've pushed it to the bottom of my to-do list and I still haven't got it done, you know. And I think, unfortunately, as crazy as it sounds, life insurance and things like that can fall into that, you know, bracket. Don't get me wrong, there's a lot of companies now who will offer really good, you know, work benefits.
It's part of their package.
As part of their packages. So, and a lot of people then rely on that and go, oh no, I'm okay. You know, I work for Santander, or I work for a big blue chip company. I've got a really good package. And that's great, but it's still important to review it, because at the end of the day, that is only a work benefit. And if you move jobs in 2 years' time, they cease. And I think society these days, it's quite fickle, isn't it? I mean, if you're in a job, you know, everyone's looking to progress. I think I saw something the other day, ultimately, if you haven't got that promotion in 2 years, you're either looking elsewhere. And, yeah, it's great if you're there long term, and you're there 10 years or whatever, you can kind of have that peace of mind. But it's just vital to just look at what you've got with work and then speak to us as well. Because it may be there's a slight shortfall and you may only need a small element of protection. I'd always say some protection is better than no protection. But yeah, it's so important to have that conversation and think about that alongside, you know, your mortgage as well, because there's so many scenarios which people just don't think about. Whether you're self-employed or you've got a child on the way, your circumstances change. And all the time, if you're remortgaging, you've been in a property, say 5 years, you know, you're remortgaging, but then since you purchasing, you've now got 2 children, or one of you has decided to go self-employed and start a business, and you don't have those
situations change all the time.
And I think it's vital to remind people that it does need to be looked at, because you never want to have that difficult phone call from someone saying, I've lost somebody and we're now down to 1 income and I can't afford the payments.
That's
I think some people also think, I'm young, it's not going to happen to me, I don't need that, and we've got other things I need to spend my money on. And then also take into account when you're older and how that can possibly affect your premiums is something that people need to think about. So it's like there's never a good a time as the present to make sure that you're covered for anything that unforeseen could happen. A newly married couple, they need their combined income to afford the mortgage. If something unforeseen happens in the first couple of months or year of owning a property, that can spell quite large troubles for people further down the line. So
99% of the mortgages, they go over to 30, 35 years or 25 years. It's not just that initial couple of years you need to be covered. You need to be covered for the whole thing, because you just never know when something's going to happen.
Absolutely. And to add to that as well, the costs as well. I mean, ultimately, if you've got a set budget in mind and you could say you could allocate £30-40 a month, great. You know, like I said, some protection's better than none. And I think for what we have on, you know, subscriptions these days, or what people spend on coffee, like in a month, if they're on the way to work, you know, it's really against the kind of protection that you could have. I think it's just an absolute no-brainer, really. That
I think you've just touched on it there quite well, Pete. That one of the sort of, to help bring it into context with clients when you're looking at a policy, and you know, could be a number of different policies or just one individual one, is bringing that monthly premium into context. You know, sitting it alongside. You know, what would you spend on a meal out if you went out, if it's a couple? You know, what would you spend on takeaways a month? What would you spend on coffees a month? And actually, when you talk about something that could range £15 to £50, a lot of people go, oh, yeah, do you know what? That's not as bad as I thought. And I think
that's one of the biggest misconceptions, though, that people have, is that they think it's going to cost them an absolute fortune.
Potentially.
Which is why they're a bit more, well, I'm taking on this big debt mortgage. It's going to be $1,500, £2,000 a month, whatever it might be. Can't afford to add something else on top of it as well.
Maybe. Yeah.
I mean, essentially, with solicitor fees and moving costs initially, then it might be something that, just, like I said, let's just get in the property, let's just sort then. But then they never do. They kick it down the kind of.
I think having that conversation with them alongside the mortgage, you know, so it's we will be talking about protection, you know, so we're feeding that in to our conversations with our clients almost from day one in many cases. So it's not a surprise. So they're warmed up to the conversation already. And I think and Pete will probably sort of back me up on this, one of the more challenging aspects as an advisor that helps on protection as well is you've got to get comfortable with having the uncomfortable conversation. You know, it's not comfortable for individuals potentially to sit there together talking to myself or talking to Pete or Ivan, one of the other protection advisors, and talking about circumstances that you don't want to think about, talking about the what next if something happens, you know, the what ifs. It's not easy. It takes time as an advisor to get yourself comfortable to have those conversations, but to get the client in a headspace where they're happy to talk about it, because when they're in that headspace, they're going to be far more receptive to the recommendations that we put forward. You know, if you are newly married, buying a property together, you know, one of the first things we'll explore is covering the mortgage debt in the event that something would happen to either of you. You know, God forbid, if one of you passed away, what does that mean? If you're a parent, you know, and what would happen if one of you were to pass away? what would that mean for you as a family dynamic? And you start to then explore different options and talk around how you're investing in each other in that scenario. So looking after each other for the future.
That's a really nice way to put it. That's a really nice way. I don't think I've heard many people talk about it like that, but it's investing in each other and it's looking after each other, which I think is a really nice way to bring it up as part of the conversation, I think.
And I think, again, that we've talked a lot about on the mortgage side of it already, about our service and sort of being with the client all the way through, you know, to complete a purchase, complete a remortgage, whatever that may be. The protection side is all encompassing within that service. You know, we're not just wanting to see them move into their property, catch up with them potentially in 2-5 years, whatever that may be. We want to make sure that they are looked after in the right way. Ultimately, if a client decides that now isn't the right time for them, then that's fine. That's their prerogative. We will invite them to review that. You know, we'll invite them to reach out to us in the event their circumstances change. You know, Pete's mentioned around remortgages as well. It is key to loop in a protection conversation at that point, because families may have come along, the circumstances may change. Exactly.
Yeah, like you say, everyone's scenarios are different, and the cost of living crisis these days, as a couple, one may decide to focus on raising children, and therefore, you know, that they've kind of sacrificed their career and income for a while to raise that. But what happens if something happens to the main breadwinner in that scenario? How is that person who's just taken not a hit, but potentially a hit on their income and their career growth to raise the children, as they got to go back to work, then who's going to, you know, you've got to, there's so many different scenarios where you have to think about the what ifs, and everyone's got a different scenario. So it's not just about, you know, if you're employed, you're okay, I've got good work benefits, or if you're self-employed, there's so many different scenarios. And it might be, like I said, you might only need a small policy, which might be less than £20 a month, less than a round in the pub. But it's definitely worth it. You potentially got income protect to plug a gap. Hopefully you don't need it, but should you need it?
Yeah. And obviously, Gary, you obviously coming at it from a slightly different angle. Obviously, you're not a protection advisor; you just solely do mortgages. But how do the conversations, or how do you approach the conversations when you're talking to a client about protection?
I think for a number of the reasons that we've touched on, in that, as a couple, even if it's a first-time buyer or somebody who's more experienced, you are taking on a fair amount of debt, and should something unforeseen happen, something needs to happen with that, as it's going to form part of your estate, or for some of your family members to have to then deal with. So I think you owe it to yourself to make sure that you take care of it, and make sure that people are not necessarily burdened with something that could have easily been taken care of, from whether or not it is a 20 quid policy or a £50 policy. Making sure that, as I said, for the unforeseen circumstances that might happen, you are safe. And it gives you huge peace of mind then to know that that part of your life will be taken care of.
And then obviously you trust the process referring.
Passing it over to these guys, 100%. Anything that gets passed over, I know that they're going to handle it with the same care, because I think everybody at Prestige has a pretty similar work ethic, and dealing with somebody, I'd have no issues having any of you talk to my clients.
That's very nice of you to say, Gary.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll steal a couple off you tomorrow. Right, okay, so moving on from obviously the protection, we talked about your backgrounds and stuff like that. Now I want to kind of talk about customer service and that sort of journey. Gary, we'll start with you, but what do you think makes you different as an advisor, and how do you think your clients would sort of describe you, having worked with you?
A two-part question. Okay, so I think that whenever I'm dealing with somebody, I always try to deal with them in the way that I would want to be dealt with myself. And to be able to then give that service through the entire process, I think is where I stand out from everybody else, making myself available. I think generally sometimes the biggest complaints you get is brokers just don't get back to people. Their client would message them and they wouldn't hear from them for 5 days. Having a WhatsApp come through, you deal with it as soon as you possibly can, because I think as a first-time buyer or even a seasoned buyer, if you've got a burning question, in the back of your mind, you want to get that answered as soon as possible. Because I don't know if people are similar to me, but when you've got a question like that, you don't think of anything else until you get the answer for that. So I think dealing with those queries and issues that might be arising in a case as quickly as possible is one thing that I said, standing head and shoulders above everybody else. And how people describe me to other people, I think with the number of referrals that I do get, as I said, it's fantastic. A word of mouth referral is probably one of the best leads that could ever land on your desk, because that initial building of trust that's so difficult
it's
with
almost
people sometimes. Exactly. You've got that initial trust dealt with. And I think with the number of those that come through, I'd like to think that I get spoken about pretty well from my clients to any of their friends or family that I might be able to help.
Yeah. Ed, what do you think separates a good broker from a great one?
Good question. I think almost Gary's articulated a lot of what does. I think kind of going above and beyond is ultimately perhaps part of the definition there. You know, we talked earlier about scenarios where you'll support the client all the way through all the different touch points, you know, signposting things for them, rather than waiting for the client to tell you what they're doing and when they need help. It's being in contact with the client throughout that initial journey, even, you know, throughout the search, however long it takes. You know, how's it gone? Anything you want to touch base on? Do you want to have a quick catch up around figures and rates and whatever? So they're constantly in the loop. You know, I'll always invite to a client, whenever you're going to go view a property, feel free to shoot me across a WhatsApp. I'll have a quick look, you know, against the structures that we're working with. I'll give you a quick update on what the costs could look relevant to that property for you. So when they are going to view, they're doing so as in the detail as they can be. Yeah. So they know what the numbers could look like. If they're walking around it and feeling like this could be the one, you know, getting that feeling, then they know what those figures could look like. Gary talked about getting a WhatsApp at the weekend, you know, that kind of thing. You know, being available is huge. You know, it's not a Monday to Friday 9 to 5 role. It's a 24/7 all year round. You know, I think in the time I've been at Prestige, if someone was to say to me, you know, Ed, how many days have you had off? I'd just say there's no such thing. Yeah, you know, you don't have a day off.
Yeah.
You are there with your clients all the way through. You know, I've been on a boat trip in around Menorca, and I've been talking to a client because they needed to understand something through their purchase process. I think, you know, I'm not going to leave that. You know, like Gary said, it's knowing that you can get an answer to a question and get it in a decent turnaround time.
Yeah.
And I think when people actually realise the effort that you put into them, and being contactable, it's not just being contactable, but it's actually being caring and being invested in them and their journey and their aspirations. I think once they realise that and understand, I think that really helps kind of on that definition. And I think that's something that at Prestige, I know that's something that at Prestige, obviously, as well as I know all these guys and yourself, you know, that is something that sets us, you know, above our peers and above our competition.
Yeah.
To add something in there, sorry, that I just thought of, sometimes when a buyer's dealing with buying a property, they might be lender specific, and having that property come through sometimes early on in the process.
How do you mean lender
As in, let's say we're a first-time buyer and we're needing to have the enhanced income multiplier going with a certain lender that allows them to get to a level which no other lender will get them to. If the property they're viewing doesn't meet that lender's criteria, having that conversation with them rather than, I've just had an offer accepted, and they send you through the property then, and you have to tell them, look, well, unfortunately, the property doesn't meet the lender's criteria.
It's on the 10th floor.
Incredibly deflating.
Yeah.
And for them, they need to then go withdraw their offer, and it's a huge emotional drain on them. So I think having that relationship with somebody that they feel comfortable enough to forward you that stuff through at the beginning of the process can hugely save time further down the line.
Yeah. It's almost, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head about, it was quite a deflating moment. You know, you go from this massive high, I've got an offer accepted, I'm really, really happy, and then you almost feel like the bad guy and saying
it's a difficult conversation.
So I think that's sometimes where, but I think that's also sometimes where you can see where clients then try and sometimes go to different brokers because they think that you're just going to poo-poo anything they bring to the table. But it's, as you said, it's about explaining why we've had to go with this lender and knowing, right, before you make an offer, just send it through to me quickly and I can double check it. As you said before, Ed, it takes 5 minutes for me to have a quick look at something and point out that it's a nice place. I understand why you want to go for it, but the lender we're looking at, I don't know if this is going to be something that they're going to consider lending on. So I mean, all you need to then do is send it through to an underwriter that we work with very close, business development manager that we work with, or call the underwriting team, and we can almost check it before they've even gone to see it and say, is this something that you guys would consider? And if they say no, it's almost, it's just letting them know, look, I'm not just here to go, yeah, okay, fine, sorry, lender says no.
It's easier to deal with that no than a no after you've had an offer accepted.
100%, yeah. But I think, but again, I think that's, and that kind of leads me into the next point I was going to ask Pete, but about going above and beyond for your clients. And that's not something that I think a lot of brokers out there have that mindset. It's just, let me know when you've got an offer accepted and I'll deal with it then and we'll see what happens. You're almost preempting it and showing them, look, I will do this for you so you're not wasting your time, you're not getting your hopes up and going to see something that we know the lender just won't consider, and then I don't want to let you down before you've even made the offer.
Or if they do consider, they're going to need a bigger deposit.
Yeah.
And then
that's a conversation you can have.
And then if they're on that viewing, that amazing property suddenly isn't as amazing because they're realizing they're having to put a bigger deposit down.
Yeah.
And they pay, and which they may not have. So that changes their mindset. And then instantly, I think definitely it's just obviously about communication, I think.
Yeah.
And being prepared sometimes to say to clients, the difficult, what you're trying to do, it's not going to work for reasons X, Y, and Z. So they fully understand. So they're not going off on a search journey that ultimately is going to be fruitless for them.
No.
You want to be able to signpost to the client early on that these are the considerations you've got to have, whether it's lender specific, because it's based on, the fact we may only have a couple of lenders or one lender we can utilize for a client, or whether it's affordability wise, anything else within their personal circumstances that would potentially put some barriers or limitations to what they've initially set out as their wants and their needs. It's being comfortable and honest with them to say, look, these are the reasons why we're going to come up against barriers here.
Yeah.
However, this is what's available. This is what you can look at, because ultimately you want the client to go, when they are out searching, not sending you through those properties that just are not going to work for whatever reason. So kind of being upfront and engaging with them early doors around what's possible is key, because ultimately that will help them achieve what they then ultimately go on and want to achieve.
Yeah. I think a good question to ask for someone like you, Pete, is one of the biggest frustrations that we get when dealing with or trying to deal with buyers is this pushback that they give about, well, I'm going to wait to speak to you until I found the property that I really, really like.
Yeah.
That's probably one of the most frustrating things that, and obviously we, not just dealing directly with clients, but obviously we're dealing with the middlemen in the agencies that when they're dealing with the buyers and stuff. We've all had scenarios like that from buyers and from agencies and from agents. Sorry, I'm going to lead on to one of our topics we're going to cover in a minute about sort of myth busting. But when you have someone that takes that approach, what would you say?
My advice there is always, it's so important to speak to a broker before you go ahead and out looking. It's going to save time. It's going to mean you're potentially going to get a better rate. Yeah. Because if you get if you speak with us first and you're able to send over your documents or whatever we need at the time, and you're out viewing. I remember a time during the Liz Truss budget where rates were going every day, just going up, being increased. And there were clients I remember who hadn't sent the documents in, who were you couldn't get hold of because they were like, oh, I'm going to the viewing and everything. They come back, had an offer accepted, great, haven't got your documents, can't submit anything, rate's gone next day. And it's like, I mean, that doesn't happen all the time. That was obviously a rare period, but they need to speak to a broker first because they need to understand what the monthly payments are going to look like on that property. And if we have everything in place, we can move quicker for them as well. So, you know, when it comes down to, had an offer accepted, but we need to move really quickly on this. Well, that's great. I'll move quickly on it, but you need to get everything to me first.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I can't move quickly on it.
Yeah.
And that's where I'd say it's key. Because I mean, back from when I was an agent, if I had sold a property, I want to know that buyer's had that mortgage application in within 24 hours of the offer being accepted. That was what I was like as an agent, because I'd want to know for my seller that it was, you know, they're a serious buyer. I know they afford, you know, I was waiting. I'd almost be speaking to that applicant or buyer, going, okay, you know, where are you? You know, have you got all your mortgage lined up? And they go, oh yeah, I've got an AIP. Great, okay, can I see it? And then like it's like 9 months old, and then they haven't actually spoken to something's changed. Those things are really important, especially in the London market when you're potentially up against 5 or 6 other people.
Yeah,
offering on a property. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So it's so important to be speaking to a broker first and just having all your ducks in a row, because you don't want to be caught out.
Another point on that, everybody thinks they have perfect credit.
Yeah.
Until you run a decision in principle and it comes back declined because they've got a Thames water bill from this previous property that was still attached to their name, and that missed payment has followed them for years.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, that's something that you then have to deal with until it's dealt with, and you can then have your credit report roll on and for it to then show. But if you have to act quickly, then there's certain lenders you might not be able to have the best price lender, and you're going to then have to deal with a lender that's rates are less favorable, and that could lead you into a position where you can no longer afford to buy at the level that you thought you could.
But that process of doing the decision in principle, getting a no, then having to go out and research and find another lender, it's not like it doesn't happen just like that. It takes time.
Exactly, and especially if you're looking at the top of your budget and all of a sudden you have to realign yourself with a lender that has less favorable loan to income policy. So yes, getting a decision in principle and knowing that you at least gone through that process, hugely important before you head out. But equally, a decision in principle is only as good as the information that's put in. So having a broker who can have a look, and you think you might earn so much, but when you look at your pay slips, there might be certain things that you have to take into account.
There might be deductions from.
Exactly, and having a chat with a broker, especially with the lender that you're looking to go with, they have an understanding as to how they're going to view your pay slips, to make sure that you're looking at the right level, to just save hassle down the line.
Yeah. Perfect. And I think we've all probably had scenarios where our first contact with a client, be it a personal referral or via an introduction, is when they've had an offer accepted. You know, so first contact at that point. And I can certainly think of a few occasions where that client's individual circumstances are perhaps not as straightforward as they may believe them to be. So then, you know, they may be hoping that they can achieve, you know, a high street rate, you know, a vanilla competitive rate. And as sort of Gary touched on there, you might sort of uncover things there that mean, no, actually, we need to be looking at a different pool of lenders here, whether that's property specific, whether it's the dynamic of your income, whether it's credit related. And then actually, Pete talked about offers been accepted, agents going to be looking for a swift application on the mortgage. However, you know, for this reason or for these reasons, we're going to have to look at this group of lenders here. And then that might become unattractive to the client. So that sort of circles back round to why, before you're going out and making offers, don't assume. You know, you need the comfort of a broker to look over it first, so we can, you know, let you know what you can go and do, what's affordable, what works. And then from there, it's a much smoother journey. You know, ultimately, we will move heaven and earth to find a solution for a client if they come to us in that scenario. But you are then likely to sort of be looking at a proposition that they might have expected they wouldn't have to be looking at ultimately.
I think one of the lines that I heard very early in my career, probably Gary, you heard it probably in the exact same place, was you wouldn't go shopping without your wallet. And you're talking about going and buying £20 pair of jeans or a £50 pair of jeans or something like that. So why would you go out and view something which we've already covered off right at the beginning of highest transaction you're ever going to make without knowing what you can afford? It's just bonkers, but happens all the time, and I'm confident it will continue to happen until the day I die. But right, so now I wanted to move on to something called mortgage myth or fact, and I've got a few questions that I wanted to run past sort of all individually, just to kind of get your feelings, so that we can quickly just sort of put a few of these to bed. Obviously, we'll still get asked these questions, I'm sure, next week. So we'll start with Gary, and we'll sort of work our way around. But you need 20% deposit to get a mortgage. Myth.
It's a myth. And to debunk that, I think you could buy something with a 0% deposit, depending on what lender you go to, and whether or not you have the correct income to meet the lender's policy. So you've always got to assume that you need to speak to a broker to make sure that you fit the criteria for it. But ultimately, any deposit that you've got, having a chat with the broker, they can then use that to determine what it is that you can actually buy for.
Perfect. Ed, your credit score is the only thing lenders care about.
Not at all. I mean, naturally it forms, credit score isn't something the lenders will look at per se. Credit profile, credit dynamic is what they look at, but that doesn't form the only thing. So, your applicant profile is something that will come in, hugely come into play. Your income, your deposit, your residency status, all of these elements are ultimately what the lenders look at. So the lenders, yes, they will reference someone's credit profile, and obviously if they've seen impaired credit, if they don't like the performance of someone's handling of borrowing previously, it could well sort of raise its head at that point. Doesn't mean that you're not going to have a lending solution available. However, ultimately it is looking at you overall as to what's going to enhance your prospects of getting a positive outcome. So no, ultimately, no, it's not.
Perfect. Peter, remortgaging is only worth it if interest rates drop.
Myth. Because ultimately, there's going to be a lot of fees involved. There's product fees, there's other costs, and sometimes it might be better to stay with that lender and just do what we call obviously a product transfer, and that might be cheaper depending on your circumstances as well. You might see a 5-year rate, and lenders, well, historically they used to reward you with obviously lower rates the longer you stay with the lender, but at the moment 5-year money is obviously higher. But it all depends on your circumstances. Just because there's a better rate on a 5-year product, but then you've got a baby on the way and you might need to move in a couple of years and buy a bigger place or whatever. So definitely myth.
Perfect. Gary, once you're approved for a mortgage, you're safe until completion.
Oh, definite myth. Anything can change in your circumstances. So until you actually get an application through and go through to exchange at completion, you're then safe from things, because lenders in their fine print will reserve the right to withdraw the offer if there's a change in the information that you've provided to them, or a change in your credit profile or anything like that. They reserve the right to withdraw the offer. So it's a definite myth.
Okay. Ed, you can't get a mortgage if you're self-employed.
Complete myth. I mean, there's 3 of us around this, so an absolute complete myth. I think it does still sometimes crop up as a question. Clients will have it, I'm self-employed, so I don't know if I can get a mortgage. And I don't know where that perception's come. Maybe it's a historic thing, but no, complete myth, straightforward.
Yeah, fine. Pete, this is quite a loaded one. So it's better to go directly to your bank for a mortgage.
Oh, okay. Definite myth. There's so many reasons as to why that's a myth. No, I think the main one is ultimately, whether it's ourselves as a brokerage or another broker, we've got access to 80 plus 100 different lenders available. We all, you're not just going to stick with Admiral for your car insurance just because you've been with them before and just because you bank with them or whatever it may be. You obviously want to speak to a broker to assess the whole market. I think that's obviously the main obviously attraction of going, speaking with a broker. to see what's available at the best at the time. But then also, you're dealing with one person directly in that bank. And once that's done, that's great. Okay. But if you've got a few more months until your completion and then mortgage rates come down, they're not going to call you up and go, oh, by the way, we've lowered our rates. We're going to move you on to a lower rate now. That just doesn't happen. Whereas obviously as brokers, we're constantly checking these rates. We get notified 24 hours before, at least 24 hours. And we can proactively move with that rate in the best interest for you. So I think that in itself can pay dividends. I think in terms of your long term saving. Then going with so definitely myth.
Perfect.
I think I've answered that one.
Probably go on for a bit longer.
I can keep going if you want.
Gary, it's you should always choose the lowest interest rate.
I mean, that could be something that you think is true. So I think it's probably a myth, because sometimes the best interest rate might not give you the borrowing that you want. Sometimes the lowest interest rate might not allow you to buy the property that you're after. So I think speaking to a broker helps you dive into the detail a bit, because the headline rate, it might not be applicable for you. So definite myth.
Perfect. Ed, you can't remortgage until your fixed term ends.
Myth. We are very proactive with our existing clients around having that early conversation around a remortgage. In an ideal world, we're touching base with them just ahead of 6 months of a deal expiring, so we can talk about the journey.
Why just before the 6 month?
So remortgage offers typically are valid for 6 months. So, if you've got a rate ending in circa 6 months' time, what we can do is talk about the market as of today. We can speculate about the market as of tomorrow and over that coming 6 month period. What we know is what the rates that are applicable and suitable for a client are today. So we can talk to them about taking action to securing one of those rates. Should the rate environment improve through that period, Pete's touched on it, we can assist with lowering that rate with the lender. If a different lender comes into the market and prices at a level that we don't think the lender that we've initially gone for is gonna be able to match or achieve in the time frame that's there, we'll talk about the pros and cons of maybe looking to switch to a different lender. Overlaying with that, we'll always then review what the product transfer options are with the incumbent lender as well, but they don't become available to us until much closer to the
like
current
90 days
rate expiring. So taking early action, you can help the client take comfort in knowing potentially what the maximum rate they're going to be exposed to is, because if rates creep over that 6 month period, they're safe against that. So sort of having that early conversation again, is key. So in answer to the question, it's a myth, but it is a whole different topic around sort of that additional service, going above and beyond, and sort of, being proactive as a firm, which is what we are.
Perfect. Pete, final one. Mortgage pre-approval guarantees you'll get the loan. Like an agreement principle.
Myth. Absolute myth. Ultimately, it is exactly what it says on the tin, pre-approval. If you, until they look at the property itself and the full underwriting process starts, and you haven't gone out and racked up a huge Klarna bill or so whatever it may be, anything can happen. A bit like the through to completion. It's very, it doesn't mean it's guaranteed. So yeah, definite myth.
Perfect. Amazing. Well, that ends our myth or fact section of the podcast. Just last couple of things from me. It's kind of want to get all of your individual perspectives, but Gary, we'll start with you. What motivates you in your career?
I think, as I said, from having my passion in property, I think dealing with people on one of the biggest journeys they're ever going to take in their life is incredibly rewarding, to be able to then have that completion phone call with them at the end of the day and know that, because thinking about when I bought my first property and walking through the front door the first time, it's one of those like milestones in life that I think everybody should strive towards. And it's really fulfilling to be able to be on that journey with them. But most importantly, to have a positive influence on that journey because there are a number of different things that can go wrong. You've got surveys, you've got things changing with regards to interest rates. You've got solicitors that might be slow, that might bring up things that you need to deal with.
Yeah.
So there's a number of different, I suppose, pitfalls that might hinder that journey. And to be able to be there as the constant reassurance that everything's going to be okay and we're going to get there, and to go above and beyond is greatly rewarding at the end of the day when you can have that phone call.
Yeah, amazing. Edward, what advice would you give someone starting out their mortgage journey?
Speak to a broker early. No, I mean, it is though. I mean, sort of having that conversation early doors, however far ahead you perceive when you're going to start your search, you know, getting that going is vital. Because
is it ever too soon to speak to a broker?
Not really. You know, I've had clients in the past where I might have a conversation with them in a moment in time, and then they're telling me, but I'm going to be going off traveling for 6 months. However, you know, I've got a job break and I'm coming back, and that's when I want to start. That's fine. You know, you take an interest in what they're going to go and do, and, you know, and wish them all the best for their traveling adventure. And then you arrange to catch up with them when they're back, and ultimately help pick up the journey with them at that point. So that's just an example. So getting that conversation in early will help us signpost and ultimately be able to provide the right and correct advice to them. So when they do take those tangible steps in their search and ultimately looking to get offers on the table, you know, their prospects of going through to completion are at their best.
Perfect. Pete, finally, what's the biggest lesson you've learned in this role?
Biggest lesson? I think I touched on it a little bit earlier, to be honest. It's just educating the client as much as you can on that first initial call, and kind of stressing the importance of, you know, being prepared, sending all your documents over. I think I've been busy at the time, dealing with a few cases, and I think it's just being prepared really, and just making sure that they know what I expect from them. So, you know, and managing their expectations there on the process, because the last thing you want is a client obviously calling you up at the 11th hour, I don't know if I accepted and I need the mortgage offer like yesterday, and they've not sent me anything. And in fairness, we've only had a 5-minute conversation just because of timings and whatever. So just being prepared really, and making sure the client's prepared and understands exactly what they need to do for us to move as quickly and as efficiently as possible for them.
Perfect. Gents, thank you so much for your time today. It's been
Thanks for having us.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for joining me.